Thank you for joining The Boost. I'm Pablo.
And I'm Leon.
And today we're going to talk ChatGPT, the courts, and 2024 predictions. All right, guys, thank you for joining us today. A lot of interesting news related to AI. As you probably saw in our last segment of The Boost, we actually chatted with a guest that focuses his business completely on OpenAI's platform ChatGPT, which a lot of companies are doing. But what's interesting now is that we're seeing a number of different court cases that are starting to hit the news wire. Most importantly, I feel like the one that's gotten the most press most recently is the New York Times suing OpenAI and Microsoft over the copyrighted work. The dilemma is actually pretty interesting because from a business owner standpoint, you want to be able to shortcut, right? You want to be able to get things done more quickly. You have to be able to generate content. The question is how do you do it? And if you're not familiar with the case, what the New York Times is saying is that, let's see here, OpenAI is literally uploading all of their content, not attributing any of that content, and then in effect also stealing, which I feel is the most important part, stealing the SEO results from that publisher, the original publisher, with zero citations.
Yeah, so the big thing too was April, they started a discussion, business conversation, right? They couldn't really come to an amicable ending to that. So now they're taking it to court. I guess in the end, it's like a licensing fee. Like the New York Times allows reprints, they allow the sharing of it, but they just want that original credit to train those bots. And I'm sure they're saying that their inventory of 100 plus years of data is probably worth millions, billions of dollars.
Billions, I'm sure. Maybe trillions, I don't know.
Microsoft could probably pay it, It's probably the best route to go is to pay for this stuff.
I'd agree, but the thing is that what you have is sort of like the new technologies versus old technology kind of, it's almost like a tug of war, right? You've got journalism, which, look, let's be honest, as far as where we are today with, journalism majors coming out of school, where are they going? Are they all working at newspapers? Are they all working at magazines? No. In most cases, they're becoming self-published or they're working for online magazines or online publishers. So it's almost like in order for the New York Times or any other major newspaper to stay relevant, they have to protect their content, right? They have to be able to protect it. But how do you do that when you're no longer talking about print as the only medium? Now we're talking about SEO, for results. Readership happens in snippets. You're not reading whole articles. How much content do you really download in a given day where you're fed something, 15 seconds at a time, 10 seconds at a time, right?
That's also, I think, the problem with the internet, and my qualm with, the problem with all of this is, at what point do we train the AI, start writing stuff, and then it's already kind of going down a weird path where it's going to start feeding itself with the same content over and over again.
Right.
It's probably going to go insane at some point. If you talk to those chatbots enough, you cause it to break and it goes insane. That was
hallucinate.
Hallucinate.
Right?
There's the word.
Right.
And more, I think writing on the web should be contained or at least labeled in some way. So training on it, I think, has to be distinguished. And right now you really can't distinguish what's AI written, what's human written. Right. Minus even that, minus mistakes and stuff. The AI makes more mistakes than a human makes sometimes.
Right. That's true. What's interesting though is that the whole value proposition for any LLM model, large language model, is that it's supposed to facilitate the production of content, for a publisher. Say for example, for us in our day-to-day jobs, supporting clients, writing content, are we necessarily going to be the experts in, a particular field for every single industry that we support or represent? Part of it is like we have to be able to gather that information. So it does have value from a research standpoint, but you take that information and you do, I guess the best way to say it is you rely on it to be accurate, right? Because let's be honest, how many people actually know about every single bit of content that's out there in its accuracy, is able to validate it when it's not being managed? And how do you manage that? So I think it lends itself naturally to these mistakes, but in the end, it's like, all right, it really depends on the user, right? Like when you talk about any bit of technology, anything could be used positively or negatively, right? That's the ethical dilemma. It's like, okay, how are you going to use this technology to effectively accomplish your goals, but also police yourself? And I just don't feel that there's going to be any way, short of just saying, hey, we're not going to be able to allow you to use our data whatsoever.
Yeah.
But it's publicly available data. I mean, the New York Times is publishing the information. It is publicly accessible.
Is it,
right?
Though? Like, we've got the paywalls. I
Well,
think, right?
yeah, but
Like,
I mean, I was able to reach the Times article this morning, and I
Was that
didn't have to
one
go
of
through a
three?
payroll. One of three, probably. But in the end, it's like they need me to buy their content, right?
correct.
But the thing is how many times have you gone to, like, say, a publisher that is citing the original article, that's very true, but redirecting the traffic to their own publication? Like, the New York Times didn't get that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go and, subscribe to the New York Times, that's probably not what I'm going to do. I still get the information, even if it's rewritten citing the original article. Likelihood that I'm going to go to the original article, I'm not a research writer. You know what I mean? I'm not writing a paper for a college class or something. Like, I'm using this information for production, which is completely different than I think anyone that's a journalism major understands, that the rules that dictate journalism are not going to be followed by people that have no clue what those rules even are.
Yeah. I think in their complaint, they talk about the free rider principle in there. Is, most people are not going to pay, and there's, in their case, a few select donors and stuff that funds their journalism through those donations, through those subscriptions. But, if this is just taken and rewritten, oftentimes it is,
Yeah.
The New York Times breaks news, thousands of publications press publish again.
Right.
There's like a fine line of it, and I think it happens a lot on YouTube, where you have people who try to like do a creative way of like commentary, but essentially you're just watching that YouTuber's video,
Right.
And kind of snickering in the background.
Yeah.
And I think the whole discussion is like, is that like a copyright? In theory, is it copyrighted material? Are they just taking it? They're not adding like, the creativity to it and redoing it? Because you can take a clip of video,
Right.
Make it your own, and then it's not a copyrighted material anymore. But in this case, like, I think, OpenAI is just taking that content and they're regurgitating it almost like word for word, like
Right.
in a lot of ways. Like, there is Reddit threads where they would go and add in like mythical like points in a book. Like, the book they're talking all about it, and they're doing fanfic or whatever it is.
Right.
And they started noticing the names pop up, and they're like, "Hey, like, can we trick this into thinking this is what we wanted to do?" They're able to find that, like, write a bunch of stuff, then go look at OpenAI and get ChatGPT to feed it back to them.
Right.
So they knew that they were just stealing the content.
Sure.
So I think there's got to be a monetization level on it.
Right.
And, like, the New York Times was working towards that. I think OpenAI, in their like effective altruism stance, they're essentially like, look, we're going to make a lot of money and we're going to make the world a net good.
Yeah.
And don't worry about the money for the creators, for the journalists, and all of that. Just worry about what we're going to do in the end, and we're going to be the best stewards of this. And I don't think they're going to be the best stewards of it.
Well, I don't think they can, only because in the end, newspapers are not the only place people get their news, right? I mean, they write lots of words, right? And that word, content is what we're talking about here that's being stolen effectively. But they're not the only ones. I would venture to say that there's more small publishers that are writing around the same things on personal blogs, small websites that have much fewer readers, for example, but they still have valid opinions. They probably are well researched, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think that's the point is like some publications just regurgitate exactly net for net what happened at the New York Times, right?
Sure.
The ones that do good and I think prosper on the internet are the ones that essentially add opinions and facts, and they add more information.
Yeah.
And differentiating that stuff for like the normal person on the internet, it doesn't matter. It's like it even verges into the conversation of Google.
Sure.
So like when you Google something on Google News in Canada, like Facebook doesn't let you consume news on the platform because they have to pay for that news.
Right.
And it's a weird thing of like, is that, like, should that news be paid for? Pre-internet-ish days, like social media, it was all paid.
Sure.
You couldn't really get news for free.
Right.
Now we're in a like information society that we can get anything for free, almost.
We expect it.
Right? Yeah, like New York Times. I don't know how many people like hit that and go, oh my gosh, I can't read this. Like, screw this, I'm done.
Right.
But I do think that there's like a part of me is like, hey, I subscribe to the New York Times because I'm like, hey, I know that's the original source. I want the best reporting. I want to support that.
Right.
I think the same thing in all of this, like OpenAI, Bard, all the LMMs out there. They need to like pay their route somehow. And I think OpenAI's kind of gone that way with their like extensions or plugins and all of that, but they need to like pay the internet.
So I feel like there's probably two things happening. First, the New York Times, like most large, newspapers, they're struggling, right?
Yeah.
They're clinging on for dear life. So this is the means of being able to claw back some revenue, right?
Yeah.
For damages, because they're seeking damages in the billions. We're not talking about like, oh yeah, this is, 50 million, 100 million. No, they're seeking damages in the billions. Why? Because Microsoft has very deep pockets. So the question comes down to, is this protecting just the integrity of their content, or is this them trying to generate legitimacy, number one, to be able to say, hey, you know what? We are the purveyors of all information because we did research. But my take on it is, over time, this could actually do the exact opposite. People would say, hey, you know what? I don't care about the New York Times. You want to block users from coming to your site without paying for it? Then you get the exact opposite impact, which is, I'm not paying for that. I expect my content for free, right? So then what happens? Well, people are going to start literally turning away from the New York Times. They're not going to, because New York Times isn't the only newspaper out there. And again, some of the best reporting that's happening online is not necessarily happening at newspapers.
Or any institution.
Exactly. I mean, it feels like, the whole thing on plagiarism, I get that. I completely get it. But say, for example, if the content wasn't verbatim, if they took it as source material and then they just simply rewrote it, and AI got so good that it was able to rewrite that content in such a way that no two words repeated in any way. Let's just say that as an example. Would the New York Times still have issue with it? Could they have issue with it?
I think on a business case, yeah, they're going to have issue with it no matter what. I think, like there's other people to this, Sarah Silverman or...
Yeah, comedian?
Comedian, author, something like that.
Yeah, she's both.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know who she is exactly, but I saw that she had sued Meta, which is like the part of them that's doing the open AI or open LMM stuff.
Yes.
She was contending like, hey, like you fed it in there, like you can't, and this is the weird like copyright stuff, like you can't like own the copy of the book digitally here, make a copy and I can't hand it to you.
Right.
Because that's stuffed in the sense.
Sure.
That's kind of what they're doing though. Like
That's true.
if it gets good enough to where it could rearrange it and add like a creativity to it and make it unique, I think it's fair. But also, I think the purpose of like AI is less about writing the full content. It's more about editing, giving summaries, giving analysis. But I think
it's supposed to be an assistant.
Yeah, an assistant, a tool, something that's going to help you along the path. Right. I think too many people are using it as a replacement for their writers. Like Red Ventures that owns like Bankrate, they own a bunch of like CNET and all of that. Even ESPN, I believe, got caught doing this. They were publishing like AI written content. They went as far as like generating AI like authors. And
right, I heard about that. Yep.
And it's just, I think there's too much greed on that other side, and just in general, humans have that propensity to like reach too far.
To not pay.
Yeah,
right.
Like they want to like maximize on their pool of opportunity.
Right, their profit versus their expense. Right.
And I think there needs to be some like guardrails around this of like, man, this isn't a tool to like write everything. Like there needs to be a way to like label it like, hey, this was written by AI.
Sure.
Some sort of detection, even the images, like, what is an image now? Like before it was Photoshop, before that it was, manipulation of the film and everything. Now there's like, there's pictures of presidents, there's deep fakes of presidents talking on TikTok, and they're having like, chess debates and stuff, and it looks very realistic.
Yeah.
And I just think we're venturing into a world of like, what is going to happen? And I get the argument of like this copyright law and all of like the monetary discussion is going to hamper the development of AI. But I think there needs to be like a quick slowdown and say, hey, what's going to happen to everybody? Like, the creators that are out that are creating and producing written content, how do they protect themselves in the end? And that's what I'm looking at. I'm less looking at like OpenAI, $80 billion, $100 billion company, Microsoft, trillion or whatever it is. Like, how does the smaller creator that's got 10, 20,000 followers on their blog, and they're making a decent money, they have a Patreon, how do they prevent that stuff from being stolen, rewritten, repackaged? And I think it kind of like flows into the next article about that, where it just got stolen.
Right. So the article that Leon is talking about is it's on futurism.com, and we'll share the links in the description for the episode. But so a company called ExcelJet, which is a Microsoft Excel resource website, writes a lot of content, tips, shortcuts, that sort of thing. Lots of content for, professionals that are using Excel to facilitate their adoption and use of Excel in business or educational settings. Well, they have a lot of very strong SEO because they've been producing this content for a long time. So what's happened? They're contending, ExcelJet is the owner of ExcelJet. His name is David Bruns. He's contending that all of his content was actually hijacked and uploaded into OpenAI, and all of that content was then rewritten. Some inaccurate content on top of that was then published by a competitor, and they didn't ever name the competitor, but they named the person. His name is Jake Ward. Said that he essentially took all of the content and stole about 3.6 million views from ExcelJet over an extended period of time. So thereby stealing business, stealing eyeballs, stealing potential revenue from the original creator, because all of that content was just uploaded en masse. To me, there's a clear ethical conflict, right? I mean, if you actually adhere to ethical rules, you don't do that, right? Yeah. But you have somebody that's literally just going after revenue, money. They're just trying to generate their own, revenue stream. So they're like, hey, you know what? I don't care if it's available for me to copy, if it's available for me to paste. I'm just going to do it. And I do feel like that is similar to, say, for example, stealing somebody's trade secrets, right? I mean, you can be sued in courts for stealing somebody's proprietary information. Yeah. I guess the question is can the information that I write today, for example, if it's original content, I can prove that I wrote it. It did not exist before I wrote it. I published it, and then someone else comes by and takes it, doesn't attribute, doesn't pay me. Would that, be essentially open season on anybody that uses, LLM, platforms?
Yeah, and we're applying, copyright law is decades old now.
Yeah.
Like we're applying something that's not really built for this. And I think, for the most part, copyright law has been very flexible.
Yeah.
Like Disney, constantly pushes the can down the road for Mickey Mouse. It's becoming public domain this year. These things, like there's a risk that essentially copyright law doesn't apply to any of this.
Yeah.
And it might just be open season. And to some extent, the internet is the wild, wild west. But this guy, Jake Ward.
30 years in.
Yeah. Well, it still is. It's, like the initial internet was, like that was the march across the country, essentially. Like that was making it to California. And we're just now like figuring things out. Like we don't know like how to govern the internet. Europe governs their part of the internet. We govern the part of the internet. China's got its own intranet.
Right.
Like there is no true internet right now. Like there's not one connected thing. Like there's still subcategories to that. Like I don't ever run into Russian sites unless I look for them.
Right? Yeah.
But this Jake guy, this whole article stemmed from a Twitter thread. And I think he's a little bit of an influencer. His bio is like building and scaling businesses to millions with organic marketing. He's a content marketer.
Yeah.
So I think to some extent this was a publicity stunt. It's all PR in the end. And he says that he stole 3.6 million like eyeballs traffic from a competitor. And in the thread, he talks about how he did it. He used a tool, and I'm looking for it right now. It's called like Byword or something. Yeah, byword.ai. And, you get free articles. I'm sure, either he's in the business or it's his, somewhere along the path.
Right.
But it's interesting. Like there's this like side business of like SEO Parasite. And the Parasite SEOs essentially use like an affiliate link and put it on your site. And you can leech all that SEO off of there.
Right.
But that's I think at the core problem is SEO. Like search engine optimization.
Yeah, you're diverting traffic. I mean, if there was no traffic,
we're just writing for bots in the end.
Well, yeah, but that's I guess part of the discussion is okay. So Google's stance is you're not supposed to game our platform, right? You're not supposed to game our bots, but yet there's a whole industry around doing exactly that, right?
Yeah.
Now,
and I'll send you this article, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Yep.
It's from The Verge. It's the people who ruined the internet, and they say SEO people essentially ruined the internet because if you Google anything today, what pops up? First 5 results: SEO optimized content.
Yeah.
A recipe. The first 1,000 words is not the recipe. It's the story of the life of the person.
Right.
That's not even real.
Sure.
And I think with the bots, we've gotten too far along. Like in theory though, like the humans are still reading and consuming some of the content, but I'm not reading that 1,000 words. I'm either pressing, like jump to recipe, or I've got an ad blocker and I just scroll through.
Or you use, ChatGPT to give you a summary of what you want to read.
That's fair.
I mean, that's how I use it primarily. I mean, so for example, if I'm using a platform like say ChatGPT, I'm doing a number of different things on the platform. I look for ideas, just coming up with content ideas. I mean, this is the way a business can legitimately use tools like these ethically, right? You're trying to get a diversification of ideas on what you could write about. You could gather, hopefully cited data, Is it cited? Sometimes, but not often.
Properly too?
Properly, no. Yeah. Every time I click a link on ChatGPT, you click it and it doesn't take you anywhere sometimes.
Well, it's because it's hallucinating.
Right.
There is this big thing, and The Verge did some more reporting on this, that it literally hallucinated that it saw, or that the publisher wrote articles about things. Right. It never did. It never covered. It was not real. And it's just, you don't know what's real.
Someone's just making it up. Right?
Yeah. It's not someone. It's the AI took hints and things, and then the language model took inferences and created something, and it will blatantly lie to you. And that's where I get a little worried on it. Like I use it in a very similar way. You know, just like these show notes that we're reading off. You inputted articles, you had it summarized. I think that's really great. I love doing that. Our show notes, we feed them in, the transcriptions AI driven, the summaries AI driven. That makes a ton of sense.
Right.
I love getting article questions, like questions that people asking on the internet to write articles about. I love doing that.
Yep.
I love, like, you know, sitting in a meeting and have it summarizing my notes that is, you know, essentially chicken scratch and bring it into something. But
you can even prepare for meetings.
Yeah.
Using those tools, right? I mean,
go, you know, look at somebody and say, hey, you know, what does this person do? Like, give me some, you know, recent accolades or notes. Even now, there's a tool called Typefully for Twitter, LinkedIn, and Mastodon and stuff.
Yeah.
It will go through my tweets and say, hey, this like one tweet did really well. Write more content about. You know, I think it was like smart home stuff. It was like, write more content about smart home stuff because it gets really great success. You know, so it gives me more ideas based on things that I've talked about and that are engaged. Right. I think all of those are great, but where it verges in the, I guess, ethical dilemma or those questions is when you're writing a whole article from AI, not editing it, not reviewing it, you really run the risk of just lying. And then also like putting people out of a job that I don't think an AI should be doing just yet. But I really love all the other applications. It's just the dangerous part of human nature is to like maximize to a crazy extent.
Well, what's interesting too is that you're talking about a platform also that's, or platforms, but we're talking about LLMs in general as a platform or a technology type. So, you know, now you've got like, you know, when we had Sage SEO with us last episode, right? We have a platform that is being built on top of another existing platform, right? So it's counting on this data to be able to build, and I would contend now there's thousands of startups that are now, you know, trying to leverage, you know, these LLM platforms for their own businesses.
And they have to leverage those big ones because you need a wealth of data. Like Microsoft knows the only way to get to this like great point of AI being like actually very useful is feeding it with a ton of data. Like it's probably going to listen to this podcast, transcribe it, feed it into it. It requires that.
Right.
And no small business can do it. Like Sage, there's just no funding model available for him to run like millions of servers somewhere across the country. So I think there's like a good happening. And like Sage SEO, I like, you know, how you do the research and there. I think there's some like interesting bits on like the articles because it is fully written that they have to be careful and then the person using it has to be careful.
Right.
And I don't know if the person using it's going to be careful.
Oh, of course. You would have to expect that they wouldn't. I mean, you know,
they need a warning label. It's like the hot coffee like dilemma is, you know, coffee's hot. It's expected.
Yeah.
Humans are bad. They will sue for that. Same thing for that is like, I think there needs to be a warning label almost. I hate to say it.
No, you're right about that. I mean, the problem is that, you know, you want to trust people to use it ethically. And at the end of the day, I always feel, and this is just human nature, the desire for generating wealth is going to outpace, for many people, is going to outpace the ethical balance that they're supposed to have. You know, I personally have a problem when, you know, trying to take content and then, again, it's because, you know, it was hammered into my head. You don't do that, right? So you have to at least, you know, I was always told, you know, in school that you have to add your own spin. You know, you have to contribute to the conversation. If you're not contributing to the conversation, then you're just simply copying it and, you know.
Even if it passed the plagiarism check, you're not contributing.
You're not contributing, exactly. So, you know, I think that the governance is probably still, it's going to be required to some degree. What that looks like, you know, I guess that's going to be, maybe that'll lead us into our trends for 2024, because I think we're probably going to be discussing this quite a bit. But anyway, it's interesting. It's something that we're seeing almost consistently. They're talking about these SEO heists. That's the term that I saw.
Or parasite SEO.
Or parasite SEO. As a term as well.
What the Futurism wrote. It was like SEO 11 or SEO Ocean. Like SEO Ocean.
Yeah.
I love that, like 11 Ocean 11 heist thing. It is a heist, and there's like parasite SEO.
Yeah, SEO Oceans 11 is what they called it. That's right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is going to be a consistent topic. I know from a business owner standpoint, someone that may not necessarily use OpenAI as often as maybe we do, in a advertising and marketing business. But there's also, plenty of writers for businesses of all kinds. I mean, home services or anything that you're trying to sell a service on the internet. You're going to need content to be able to draw in traffic. And I guess the question comes down to is, at what point will the need for professionals to do this work? I mean, I think we're far off into the future still, but if it's not managed properly, how is it just going to be to the highest bidder? Like, I'm just going to spend the most money and then buy the most expensive technology, and it's going to do everything for me with no cost?
So tying that to like that first episode that we did about page builders and stuff.
Yes.
The greatest debate on the internet has been developers aren't needed. They're going away. Like you're not going to be a developer any longer. Like this is going to stop developers. I think to some extent there's like the world's ending always happening.
Sky is falling.
Yeah, sky is falling. The world's ending always happening. Like AI poses a greater risk to some of that.
Yeah.
But also, like it's the same thing. Like Wix, Squarespace, these page builders didn't stop developers. Like there's still a need for them. I think it niched them a little bit further into like very specific tool sets and building applications and apps and all of that. Less of like these like small websites for a roofer or a plumber. Like you don't need to do that anymore. You can go to somebody that has on a more affordable price than a $100,000 web app. You can go get something for $2,000 to $10,000 and be good. I think the same thing is going to happen in the space of writing and all of that. Similar to that, writers for very specific sets of stuff, like maybe marketing copy, will become less required, and then over time you're going to see like writers kind of niche into spaces, say marketing copy for B2B SaaS, and they do it very well. They probably leverage OpenAI or some of the other ones. Like there's Bard, there is the Llama one from Facebook. There is like other ones that kind of put their personal spin on ChatGPT. So there's other ones out there that I think over time will kind of flow into like the river of the internet of like humans are still going to be there and probably always be there. Yeah. And AI won't pose this great risk, but I think the worry is, as humans, we always remember, like every movie, AI destroys us. And I don't know if that will happen. I really hope it doesn't, but... Like
the Terminator?
Yeah, like all of that. Like, I watched a movie or a TV show called The 100. The whole world ended because of AI in the end. And it almost ended in the end because of AI. Like, and I think to some degree that AI probably hallucinated.
Right.
But I really do think like humans will leverage it, and at some point there will be like a good equal balance to this. And we're just always like, we don't want change, and change is happening. And I also think there needs to be enough pushback to slow down the AI companies to some extent, so that they let people flow into this, because give it 3 years, AI is not going to really be the discussion point anymore. It would just be something in the background.
Let's hope not, because right now it feels like there is a sort of a fatalistic attitude about it. But I mean, looking at the New York Times article, I mean, there were 1,300 comments on that article in a very, very short period of time. So this is definitely a hot topic. All right, well, I think that covers everything we wanted to talk about. But as always, make sure that you comment, like, follow, whatever it is that you want to learn about, please let us know as well, because our episodes are driven not just by our own knowledge, but also, by what the audience cares to learn more about.
No, that's all I got.
All right. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Boost.